The reason you're stuck may not be a lack of discipline. It may be that your brain has already shown you a future so frightening that part of you is trying to protect you from ever reaching it. Not the future you want, the future you're afraid might happen if you try and fail. The bills you can't pay, the people you disappoint, the judgment, the embarrassment, the story you'd have to tell yourself if it doesn't work. And once your mind rehearses that future enough times, fear starts disguising itself as intelligence. You don't say, "I'm scared." You say, "I'm being realistic. I should wait. I need more clarity. I'll launch when I feel ready." But if you don't understand what's happening, you may spend years obeying a future that only exists in your imagination. That's what this video is about. Why your brain imagines the worst first, why it feels so convincing, and how to start directing your focus so your subconscious begins preparing for the future you want, not only the one you fear. Because fear is imagination directed by survival. Faith is imagination directed by intention. And the difference between those two may be one of the most important things you ever learn. And if you already know this is a pattern for you, I've created a free subconscious starter kit that includes the Sanctuary session, a guided audio experience to help you practice directing your focus instead of letting fear run the movie. You can grab it through the link below. But first, let's understand why your mind goes to the tiger in the bush before it goes to possibility. Because this pattern is not random. It's ancient. It's intelligent. And if you don't learn how to work with it, it can quietly shape the direction of your life. One of the strangest things about being human is that we can suffer from things that haven't happened. Your business hasn't failed. The sales call hasn't gone badly. The post hasn't been criticized. The offer hasn't been rejected. The money hasn't run out. The future hasn't arrived. And yet, your body can begin reacting as if that future is already on its way. Your chest tightens, your jaw locks, your breathing changes, your focus narrows, your energy drops. You start scanning for exits. And then the mind does something very clever. It starts turning avoidance into wisdom. Maybe I need more time. Maybe I should change the strategy. Maybe I should wait until things are more stable. Maybe I'm not ready yet. And sometimes that's true. Sometimes you do need more information. Sometimes the timing generally isn't right. But often the real issue is not the strategy. It's the inner movie. You're not responding to what's happening. You're responding to what your brain has imagined might happen. And the more vivid that imagined future becomes, the more real it starts to feel. Not because it's true, because your nervous system is preparing for it. This is where we need to understand something important about the human brain. Your brain is not just storing memories of what happened. It's constantly using pieces of the past to simulate the future. Researchers sometimes talk about the prospective brain, the brain's ability to use stored information to imagine, simulate, and predict possible future events. Studies on episodic future thinking suggest that imagining the future uses much of the same neural machinery involved in remembering the past. That's a remarkable ability. It means you can picture something that doesn't exist yet. You can imagine a business, a conversation, a launch, a future family, a new identity, a different life. You can see something internally before it exists externally. That ability is part of what lets human beings create. But the same ability can also make us suffer. Because the brain doesn't only use memory to imagine what could go right, it uses memory to imagine what could go wrong. If you've been rejected before, your brain can use that memory to imagine future rejection. If money has felt unsafe before, your brain can use that memory to imagine future financial danger. If you've disappointed someone before, your brain can use that memory to imagine future disappointment. This is why the future doesn't always feel open. Sometimes it feels like a threat forecast. You're not just imagining possibility, you're imagining danger. There's an old survival image that captures this perfectly. Imagine one of our ancestors walking through the grass and hearing a rustle in the bushes. That rustle could be nothing. It could be the wind. It could be a harmless animal. It could be completely meaningless. But it could also be a predator. And from a survival perspective, the brain doesn't want to spend too much time debating that. If it assumes danger and is wrong, it wastes a little energy. If it assumes safety and is wrong, that could be catastrophic. So the survival brain developed a very understandable bias. Danger first. Threat first. Worst case first. Fear first. And that ancient logic still lives inside us. Only now, the tiger in the bush is not a tiger. It's an email, a launch, a sales conversation, a price increase, a post you haven't published, a webinar you're preparing, or a business you're trying to grow. Maybe a hard conversation you're avoiding. Your brain hears a rustle and starts filling in the rest. What if this doesn't work? What if I'm judged? What if I lose money? What if I disappoint my family? What if I finally try and discover I'm not as capable as I hoped? And this is the part that matters most. Most people are not only afraid of failure. Failure by itself is almost too abstract. What people are really afraid of is the consequence of failure, what it would cost, who it would affect, what it would seem to prove, what story they'd have to tell themselves afterward. So if you're launching a business, you may not only be imagining, what if I don't get clients? You may be imagining, what if I can't pay the bills? What if we have to change our lifestyle? What if my spouse is disappointed? What if I can't give my child the life I want to give her? What if I have to explain to people that this didn't work? What if I feel humiliated? That's not just thinking. That's emotional rehearsal. That's the mind building a world and the body beginning to live inside it. And this is where the subconscious comes in. You'll hear me sometimes say, the subconscious can't tell the difference between what's real and what's imagined. And as a teaching shortcut, I still think that points to something important. But if we're being more precise, it's not that your entire brain is helplessly confused. If you're sitting at your desk imagining a future where the business fails, part of you knows you're imagining. You know the launch hasn't failed yet. You know the bill you're picturing isn't physically in front of you. You know the conversation hasn't happened. But the deeper emotional systems of the brain and body don't only respond to what's objectively happening. They respond to what's vivid, what's repeated, what's emotionally charged, what feels meaningful. So the imagined event may not be real in the outside world, but it can become real in your nervous system. Your muscles tense, your breathing changes, your focus narrows, your decisions shift. And now a future that hasn't happened is already shaping how you behave. There's solid research behind this. When you imagine something vividly, your brain doesn't treat it like meaningless noise. It can activate emotion, memory, and physical responses in the body. That's why a feared future can feel so real, even when part of you knows it hasn't happened. And you already understand this intuitively if you've ever had a nightmare. You wake up, your heart is pounding, your body is tense. For a moment, you're still carrying the fear. Then you realize, oh, it was just a dream. But in the middle of the dream, it didn't feel like just a dream. And even after you wake up, the body can take a few moments to catch up. Now, worry is not the same as dreaming. You're awake, you know you're thinking. But when you become absorbed in a vivid future scenario, especially one loaded with emotion, your attention narrows around that inner picture. The failed launch, the unpaid bills, the disappointed look, the critical comment, the business not working, the imagined loss. And this is where worry starts to look a lot like self-hypnosis. Hypnosis is a state of trance. And trance is not strange, it's not exotic. It's something you move in and out of naturally. Anytime your attention narrows and you become absorbed in one inner experience, you're moving into a kind of trance. You felt this when you're driving somewhere familiar and suddenly realizing you don't remember the last few minutes of the road. Or reading something so deeply that the room around you fades into the background. Your attention narrows, everything else becomes less important. The inner experience becomes more dominant. That's trance. And when you're worrying intensely, the same kind of thing can happen. Your attention narrows around a feared future. The imagined scene becomes vivid. Emotion rises in the body. Everything else fades into the background. And then your mind starts giving you suggestions. This won't work. You're not ready. You're going to disappoint people. You're going to lose what you have. You should wait. You should pull back. You should protect yourself. That's why worry can become accidental self-hypnosis. You're not doing it on purpose, but you're entering a focused, emotionally charged inner state and repeatedly suggesting a feared future to yourself. And the subconscious is highly responsive to that combination. Focus, imagery, emotion, repetition, suggestion. So if the inner movie is fear-based and you keep rehearsing it, your system begins organizing around that suggestion. Not because the future is true, because you've practiced it until it feels believable. And this is also why intentional hypnosis, guided imagery, and subconscious rehearsal can be so powerful. They use the same doorway: focused attention, imagery, emotion, repetition, suggestion. Only now you're using that doorway deliberately instead of letting fear walk through it first. This is why visualization is so powerful. But visualization cuts both ways. We often talk about visualization as if it only means seeing the positive outcome. The athlete visualizing the shot, the speaker visualizing the room, the entrepreneur visualizing the successful launch, the calm, the money, the freedom. And yes, that can be powerful. But worry is visualization too. Anxiety is often visualization pointed at the worst case scenario. Rumination is rehearsal. Catastrophizing is imagination with emotional intensity. When you repeatedly imagine what could go wrong and you do it with fear in the body, you're practicing a future. Not intentionally, not consciously, but still practicing. You're teaching the nervous system what to prepare for. You're teaching the subconscious what to expect. You're making danger familiar. And familiar things often feel safer than unfamiliar things, even when the familiar thing hurts us. That's one reason a person can consciously want success and still keep orienting toward struggle. There's a strange comfort in that known problem. At least the known problem is known. The new future may be better, but it's unfamiliar. And to the survival system, unfamiliar can feel dangerous. This is where people sometimes talk about the reptilian brain. I understand why. It's simple language. It points toward primitive survival patterns. But scientifically, the idea that we have three separate brains stacked on top of each other, one reptilian, one emotional, one rational, is too simplistic. The brain is more integrated than that. So when I talk about the survival brain, I mean your brain and body contain older protective systems that prioritize danger, especially under uncertainty. Those systems interact with the prefrontal cortex, which is involved in planning, future thinking, decision-making, self-regulation, and directing attention. The prefrontal cortex is part of what allows you to imagine a future and move toward it. It's part of the gift, but it doesn't operate in isolation. It's working with emotional memory, threat detection, body state, past experience, and all the protective systems trying to keep you safe. So if your conscious mind says, let's launch, but your emotional system says, last time visibility led to pain, the body may not simply obey the plan. It may hesitate, it may freeze, it may create confusion, it may convince you to wait. And from the inside, all of that can feel very reasonable. This is what makes the pattern so hard to catch. Fear rarely announces itself as fear. It often appears as analysis, planning, research, preparation, realism, discernment, waiting for the right moment. And again, sometimes those things are valid, but sometimes they're fear wearing a better outfit. Sometimes I'm being realistic really means I've rehearsed the worst case scenario so many times that possibility no longer feels believable. Sometimes I need more clarity really means I don't yet feel safe enough to move. Sometimes I'm not ready really means my body has mistaken uncertainty for danger. This is why you can't solve every internal block with more information. You may already have enough information. You may already know the next step. You may already know what needs to happen. But knowing the step isn't the same as feeling safe enough to take it. And if the fear movie is more emotionally convincing than the vision, the fear movie wins. This is where that line comes back. Fear is imagination directed by survival. Faith is imagination directed by intention. I don't mean faith only in a religious sense, although it can include that. I mean faith as an inner orientation, a chosen direction of focus. Fear says, what if it all goes wrong? Faith says, what if something meaningful is possible here? Fear rehearses the consequence. Faith rehearses the capacity. Fear asks, what could I lose? Faith asks, who could I become? Fear prepares the body to avoid. Faith prepares the body to move. Both use imagination. Both use focus. Both project into the future. The difference is who's directing the movie. Left alone, the mind will often drift toward fear. Not because you're broken, because fear has survival value. There's a well-known review in psychology called Bad is Stronger Than Good, which argues that negative events, negative information, and possible threats often have a stronger psychological impact than positive ones. And that makes sense. Your ancestors didn't survive by treating berries and predators as equally urgent. They had to notice danger quickly. The problem is that the modern brain can bring that same urgency to psychological threats. A slow month, a rejected offer, a critical comment, a business risk, a difficult conversation, a future that asks more of you, your brain starts scanning for the tiger. But sometimes the tiger is made of imagination. So what do we do with this? The answer is not to pretend nothing can go wrong. That's not real confidence. Things can go wrong. Businesses can fail. People can judge. Money can get tight. Plans can fall apart. Pretending otherwise doesn't create trust. It creates a fragile kind of positivity that collapses the moment reality gets difficult. Real confidence is different. Real confidence is the ability to move forward while uncertainty is present. So the work is not to silence your brain. The work is to lead it. Here's a simple way to begin. First, catch the movie. When fear starts building, don't only ask, what am I worried about? Ask, what future am I rehearsing right now? What is the actual scene? What am I seeing? What am I hearing? What consequence am I imagining? What am I afraid this would mean? Because often the first answer is too vague. You might say, I'm afraid the launch won't work. But that's not the whole movie. The movie might be, if it doesn't work, I'll feel exposed. I'll have to explain myself. I'll disappoint my family. I'll lose faith in myself. I'll have to face the possibility that I'm not as good as I hoped. That's the emotional material. That's what your subconscious is responding to. Second, name it as a simulation. Say to yourself, this is a fear simulation. This is my brain trying to protect me. This is not prophecy. This is not proof. This is a possible future my mind is rehearsing because it wants to reduce uncertainty. You're not fighting the mind. You're not shaming it. You're recognizing what it's doing, and recognition creates space. Third, regulate your body before trying to force a new thought. This is where a lot of people skip a step. They try to paste a positive affirmation over a nervous system that's still in threat mode. But if the body is activated, the affirmation is unlikely to land. So slow down, breathe, unclench the jaw, drop the shoulders, feel your feet, look around the room. Remind your body where it actually is, not in the imagined future, here, now, in this moment. You don't need to become perfectly calm. You just need enough safety for the system to become more receptive to direction. Fourth, choose the image you want to rehearse. Not a fake fantasy where everything goes perfectly. Something believable enough that your body can begin to accept it. Maybe you imagine sending the email and feeling grounded. Maybe you imagine showing up to the sales call and speaking clearly. Maybe you imagine publishing the video and letting it exist without obsessively checking. Maybe you imagine telling your spouse, I'm staying with this, and feeling proud of the way you're showing up even before the external result is complete. Maybe you imagine a slow launch, but instead of collapsing, you stay steady, learn, adjust, and continue. This is important. The better inner movie isn't always everything goes perfectly. Sometimes the better inner movie is, I can handle what happens. That may be far more powerful, because the subconscious often needs safety before it can believe in success. So don't only visualize victory, visualize capacity, visualize steadiness, visualize resilience. Visualize yourself staying connected to who you are even when the outcome is uncertain. Fifth, add emotion. This is where the subconscious starts listening. Feel the relief, feel the steadiness, feel the pride, feel the quiet certainty. Feel what it's like to move forward without abandoning yourself. If fear uses emotion to make the worst case scenario convincing, then intentional focus needs emotion too. Not hype, not forced positivity, a real felt sense. Calm, resolve, possibility, trust, faith. And sixth, take one small action that gives your nervous system evidence. Because the subconscious is not only shaped by imagery, it's shaped by experience. If you rehearse safety and then take a small visible action, you begin building a new association. I can move toward this and remain safe. I can publish and survive. I can sell and stay grounded. I can be seen and still belong to myself. I can try and not collapse. That's how the future starts to become less threatening, through repeated emotional rehearsal and lived evidence. That's how you begin to redirect the system. There's a Zen-style story I like. A student comes to the teacher overwhelmed by fear. He says, "Master, I'm being chased by a tiger." The teacher looks around and says, "Where's the tiger now?" The student points to his head. And the teacher says, "Then why are you running with your feet?" I don't know if that's an official Zen story or one of those stories that has been passed around in different forms, but the point is useful. So many of the tigers we run from are not in the room. They're in the mind. They're in the future. They're in the projection. And yet the body runs anyway. That's the human condition. We can suffer from things that haven't happened. But the same capacity that creates fear can also create vision. The same imagination that rehearses disaster can rehearse courage. The same focus that builds dread can build certainty. The same mind that sees the tiger can learn to see the path. This is why subconscious work matters. Because the goal is not just to think a better thought. The goal is to make the better thought emotionally believable, to bring the body into it, to practice the future you want until it no longer feels foreign, to create a felt sense of safety around the next version of yourself. This is why I care so much about hypnosis, guided imagery, subconscious rehearsal, and intentional focus. Not because they're magic, because they work with the same mechanism fear has been using against you. Fear gives you an image. Fear adds emotion. Fear repeats it. Fear narrows your attention. Fear suggests what you should avoid. Subconscious rewiring takes that same process and uses it deliberately. It gives you a better image. It adds emotion. It repeats it. It narrows your attention in a useful direction. It suggests who you're becoming. And over time, the future starts to feel different. Not because you've removed uncertainty, because you've stopped letting uncertainty choose the movie. If you take nothing else from this video, take this. Your mind will imagine the future. You can't stop that. The question is whether fear gets to direct it by default. Because if fear directs it, the future will usually begin with danger, the worst case scenario, the consequence, the disappointment, the loss, the tiger in the bush. But if you learn to direct your focus consciously, you can begin using that same future-seeing mind to rehearse steadiness, courage, alignment, and possibility. Fear is imagination directed by survival. Faith is imagination directed by intention. And the work is learning to become the director. If you want to start practicing this, the Subconscious Starter Kit is a good place to begin. Inside it, you'll get the Sanctuary session, which is a guided audio experience designed to help you step out of fear-based mental noise and into a calmer inner space where you can direct your focus on purpose. You'll also get short orientation videos on hypnosis and the subconscious mind, plus access to my free training where I go deeper into why self-sabotage happens and how to begin rewiring the subconscious patterns underneath it. This isn't about forcing yourself to think positively or pretending nothing can go wrong. It's about learning how to steady the system, choose the inner image, and give your subconscious a different emotional rehearsal. You can get the free starter kit through the link in the description. And as you move through the rest of your day, just notice one thing. When your mind starts imagining the future, who's directing the movie? Fear or intention? Because the future you rehearse most often is often the one your body starts preparing for. And sometimes the first real shift is simply taking back the director's chair. Remember, breakthroughs begin within. Bye for now.